Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is now 5:30, and I will call our regular meeting of the Burnsville City Council to order. We begin our meetings with a moment of silence followed by the Pledge of Allegiance, and we invite you to join us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Tonight's meeting is being conducted both in person and online. Council members and our staff are in the chambers. And I would say that anyone who would like to join the meeting can join us on burnsvillemn.gov meetings or watch us on Comcast Channel 16 or 859. And you can also join us by Zoom, and it's not on my background, zoom.us/join.
Yes.
Yes, so you can join us on Zoom. Yeah, all right. The next item on the agenda is our announcements. And our announcements have to do with all of our upcoming meetings, and we have two proclamations this evening. Regular council meetings are scheduled for Tuesday, October 4th at 5:30 p.m. and Tuesday, October 18th at 5:30 p.m. We have a work session that's scheduled for Tuesday, October 11th at 5:30 p.m. We have a work session that's scheduled for Monday, October 3rd at 5:30 p.m. And it's a special work session that's a joint meeting with the ISD 191 board, and that will be at Fire Station 1. We also have a quarterly roundtable with our staff, and that's scheduled for Tuesday, October 25th at 5:30 p.m. Unless I note a different location for the meeting, all meetings of the Burnsville City Council is in the chambers. And so we have two proclamations this evening, and I will read them from over there. Members of the council, staff, and the community of Burnsville. Our first proclamation is for Women of Today Week. Whereas the Minnesota Women of Today and United States Women of Today have set aside the week of September 18th through the 24th, 2022 to celebrate the many community activities and dedicated membership. And whereas the Burnsville Women of Today are dedicated to promoting community service, such as Adopt a Street Cleanup, 360 Communities Donation and Service Projects, Sleep in Heavenly Peace, volunteer shifts and collections, darts cleanup projects, mission outpost donations, BWT high school service scholarships, volunteer a local senior center, and fundraising for organizations such as Crescent Cove Children's Hospice, Kids in Kinship, and March of Dimes, among others. And whereas the Burnsville Women of Today have been a vital part of this community for going on over 30 years, supporting local organizations and community needs through fundraising and collections such as school supply drives, hygiene item collections, treats for essential workers, and holiday gifts and donations. Whereas the Burnsville Women of Today have provided personal enrichment and leadership development to members of this community through service initiatives. And whereas the Minnesota Women of Today and the United States Women of Today are united by our friendship and lifetime in future. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Elizabeth Couts, Mayor of the City of Burnsville, Do hereby proclaim the week of September 18th through the 24th, 2022 as Women of Today Week in the city of Burnsville, Minnesota, in recognition of their service and volunteerism nationwide and in our community. Proclaimed this 20th day of September 2022. And Mrs. Pat Larson is receiving this for the Women of Today. And thank you so much for all the difference that you make for our community. You and yours, so you need to turn around. So you're, yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
You make such a difference in our community, and we truly appreciate it. Thank you. And if all of the women of today could stand up so you could be recognized, I think there's a few of you. Yes. Thank you. The next proclamation is for Manufacturing Month, October 2022. Whereas manufacturing is a dynamic and robust industry crucial to the health and strength of Minnesota's diverse economy, and whereas manufacturing saw the largest industry job gains since the beginning of 2020 in Minnesota, and workers took home $23.3 billion in wages from Minnesota manufacturing jobs in 2021. And workers took home $328.2 million in wages from Burnsville manufacturing jobs in 2021. That's awesome. Manufacturing jobs in Burnsville account for approximately 24.5% of Dakota County's total manufacturing employment, and manufacturing in Minnesota pays an average annual wage of $74,626, which is 11% higher than the state's overall average wage. And whereas manufacturing provides more than 312,000 highly skilled, well-paying jobs, which significantly contribute to Minnesota's high standard of living and economic vitality. And whereas manufacturing provided Burnsville with 4,609 jobs in 2021, which makes it Burnsville's third largest employing industry sector. And now, therefore, I, Elizabeth Couts, Mayor of the City of Burnsville, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim October 2022 as Manufacturing Month, proclaimed this 20th day of September 2022. And accepting the proclamation is Mrs. Jennifer Harmoning from the President of the Chamber of Commerce, and Beth Weber, our staff. So here you go, ladies. So I think it'll be wonderful if our city manager and our city council could come over here so we can take a picture with you guys. Yeah. Yeah, since this is Manufacturing Week in Burnsville. And, yeah, so. Okay. Where's Greg?
I'm coming.
Okay.
I was going to take the.
He's trying to sneak
Yeah,
in
well,
the
how about
back
if-
somewhere.
yeah,
So I'll just, there we go.
Yeah, are you there? Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Vince.
I have to stand right in front of Kara.
Kara, there you
Okay.
go. Perfect. Right there.
There. Perfect.
Okay.
What I'm gonna say.
Tell them where
Yeah,
to
yeah,
You
direct
can't
them.
see me, I can't see you. There we go. Let's move over just one.
Okay, thank you so much.
And we hope you'll all join us on Wednesday, October 5th at Showcraft. We hope you'll all join us on Wednesday, October 5th at Showcraft Industries to celebrate Manufacturer Month together from 8 to 9 a.m. for our annual coffee break.
Yeah, thank you. And we'll be there. Okay. The next item on the agenda is citizens' comments. This is the opportunity for anyone that would like to address the council on an item that is not on the printed agenda and not an application form that will be coming before us at a future date. Is there anyone who wishes to address the council? Anyone who wishes to address the council? Ms. Collins, I believe that there's someone on Zoom who wishes to address the council.
Yes, Madam
And at
Mayor.
this
We have
time, we
Andrea
would,
Newberg.
okay. And if you can give us your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name's Andrea Nurberg. I live at 13655 Oakwood Curve in Burnsville, and I've lived here for about 27 years. I love Burnsville, I love my neighbors, and I love seeing the city grow. I wish to comment about the problem of the panhandling, and I understand that it's a tricky situation in terms of not wanting to restrict people's speech. And absolutely, I believe in the Constitution, I believe in our rights, and I wouldn't want to infringe on anybody's. Now, the thing with that panhandlers do, well, first I'll say that other cities in other states and our neighboring suburbs have actually successfully criminalized panhandling. And the reason why I think it should be criminalized is it's a very, very dangerous thing. And the people who panhandle, now this is not criminalizing poor people, because most poor people don't panhandle. This isn't criminalizing homelessness, because most homeless people don't panhandle. If anything, this is victimizing more poor people, because panhandling tends to occur in the city center more where low-income people live. And what happens when a person panhandles is they're not a person, they're not a bad person, but they are addicted to drugs that make them do, it can make them do very bad things. It can make them unpredictable. The kind of drugs that a person uses when they're panhandling are the hard drugs, or cocaine, crack, meth, all of which are known to make people violent and unpredictable. Oh, okay, I saw a comment. I didn't know if I should respond to that. The thing with the, when you have people who are soliciting money, they're supporting a habit. These aren't well-adjusted people. And I used to even give them money. I felt bad for them. And I know a lot of people in Burnsville feel bad for them. People in Minnesota have a reputation for being very empathetic and generous. And I know they mean well. And I used to think that I didn't like seeing them there, but I always thought, well, maybe they fell on bad circumstances as a result of hospital bills. Maybe they, maybe, who knows, maybe they lost their job and didn't have any savings. However, the thing that makes me think that this isn't the case with the panhandlers in Burnsville is every time that they leave a big pile of garbage. There are garbage cans right across the street, like literally across the street from where they've been standing for a few hours. They could throw their garbage there. I would think a person who is conscientious, doesn't want to be there, they're going to make sure to pick up after themselves. The other thing that happens when you've got people who are drug addicted and people are giving them cash, well, the drug dealers go to where the business is. And I can tell you firsthand, we have a homeless encampment in our backyard sometimes. And it's very scary, very scary. And, you hear voices at night, you see lights of people's cigarettes. If you try to, when you're trying to sleep and you hear a branch break outside your window, you don't know if that's somebody trying to break into your house or not. You don't know, like when you see a person who, you feel bad for them out there because they're asking for money, this person looks fine at that time. Well, what if they don't get their fix? They become a different person. What if their drug of choice makes them violent? You've got an increase of crime when this happens. We all know that people break into cars, they break into homes in order to support their drug habits. And it's not like there's not help for people. Anybody can get addicted to drugs or alcohol. There are hospitals like a half a block away from where most of them stand. And these hospitals would have to admit them if they said, if they said their situation. And then lastly, I just wanted to say that as somebody who loves Burnsville, and like I said, I've lived here 27 years. My husband and I moved here from Minneapolis, and one thing we moved from was to get away from the crime. And what you notice is that crime always starts without exception from panhandling. And once you get one panhandler, there's more and more and more, and they replicate like crazy. And they're never going to go less. Just hoping that they go away is not going to do anything. I'd suggest, I'd basically implore our city council to look into how our neighboring suburbs are successfully banning panhandling, and keep our residents safe and keep Burnsville a nice place to live.
Thank you, Mrs. Nuremberg, for coming before us and speaking on this item. Our police chief is present this evening, and she can tell you what we're doing to help those folks not get into incidents where the public safety is involved. So Chief Schwartz is going to address it, and so at least you understand that we are doing some things to help with that initiative.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, thank you. Appreciate the comments. A couple of things. We hear you and understand we've gotten a number of complaints from the community. So we are working with our behavioral health unit, and we're working with our Dakota County social worker partners to make contact with people that are out in the medians. There are First Amendment protections for people in certain areas that they may be. So we've been working with the city attorney to understand that space and really just educating people, making sure people are safe. We don't want people walking into the roadways. So we're working on that. And so we'll be coming to council October 11th with Allied Services, who's going to be helping us with this. And just to provide some more education to the city, to you and to the community, so we understand what is acceptable and what is not acceptable in terms of pedestrians being on the roadways, being in the medians, and things like that. So I'm sorry, I believe it was Andrea, I'm sorry, I don't remember your last name, but if you have concerns about hearing voices or there's something going on in your neighborhood, I would encourage you to call 911 at the time that is happening, and then we can certainly have some people come out and have our officers check on it for you, if that's helpful.
Okay. Mrs. Nuremberg, public safety and the safety of our community is of primary importance to all of us. So we take your comments very seriously, and our police chief and our staff have been working diligently on this issue, but also making sure that we comply with the Constitution. We all take an oath that the Constitution is to be upheld. And so we want to make sure that those folks' rights are being upheld, and at the same time, the rest of the community is also safe. And one of the things that you should know is that I believe that our staff have been doing great work, because you probably don't see many of them on County Road 42 and 5, those intersections, and straight down County Road 42. And our police and our partners have been working hard to keep them safe and to keep the rest of Burnsville safe. And we'll continue to work on that initiative. So thank you for coming in this evening and talking to us. Yeah. Thank you, Chief.
Yes.
Thank you, Mrs. Nuremberg, and have a good evening.
You too.
Yeah. Okay, we will now move on to the next item on our agenda, and this is additions to the final agenda, and it is for emergency items only. City Manager Lindberg, are there any emergency items to come before the body?
None from staff, Mayor.
Okay, members of the council? Okay, may I have a motion? The next item is the consent agenda. This is a group of items that's considered to be routine and will be enacted in one motion. However, an item on the consent agenda can be removed for a separate discussion and vote. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes an item to be removed for a separate discussion and vote? Okay. Ms. Collins, is there anyone on the Zoom platform?
No one that has asked for an item to be removed, Madam Mayor.
Okay. City Manager Lindberg, the staff want an item to be pulled for a separate discussion and vote.
Not from staff this evening, Mayor.
Okay, members of the council?
I ask that 4J be pulled.
Council member, okay, J is being pulled. This is the JPA with Dakota County for embedded social workers. Okay, that item 4J is pulled for a separate discussion and vote. May I have a motion for the balance?
Move to approve.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say nay, and the motion carries. Councilmember Schultz. Schwartz and Schultz.
I know,
Oh,
right?
yeah, okay.
Those dang German names.
I know, yeah, okay. So 4J is to approve a joint powers agreement between the city of Burnsville and Dakota County for an embedded social worker.
So I am not pulling this item to speak against it. I am pulling this item to highlight it because I think this is something extremely positive for our community. And so I do want to call it out so our residents do understand the benefit for this, and also that this is not an item that is impacting our budget either. So, which is also part of why that was on consent. So, on this item, this is something that we have been wanting for quite a while, both as a city, staff. This is something that is going to really help our first responders, help our city, and it's doing it in a way that shows that we care about our residents, and we are interested in assisting them, especially when they're in a crisis type situation. And I know that I did receive a couple questions from residents about how much, this would add to the budget and those types of things. And so I did want to point out that is not what this item does. We are not hiring a full-time employee or, doing benefits. Like that's not what this joint power is about. And I also want to extend my thanks to Dakota County on this. I believe that our county has been leading the way on many of these issues, and I'm pleased to see that is continuing, and I look forward to seeing what we're going to do in the future as well. So with that, unless there is any discussion, I would motion to approve.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. And I just want to add that what this does is that what people don't realize is that in the city of Burnsville, our police chief and our officers have worked very hard so that we have put together a behavioral health unit. And it's that behavioral health unit that we use social services, so they interact with our police and they go out on calls. And this helps everybody to understand that it is about the safety of everyone and their health. So that's what this does. And it is a great joint powers. And we have many joint powers with not only the county, but with other partners, government partners. So there's a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say nay. And the motion carries. We now move on to our regular agenda. And the first item on the regular agenda is the affirmation of our employee total rewards enrichment. And presenting this evening is our Director of HR, Carissa Bartholomew. Good evening, Ms. Bartholomew, and welcome.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the council. Thank you very much. I'm excited to be here tonight, and I am extremely excited to talk to you about our total reward enhancements for the 2023 year. This is very near and dear to me, and I'm extremely excited to be here and chat and share them with you. So thank you for having me. All right. And I do want to mention these enhancements that you're seeing and hearing about tonight. These are all part of the proposed budget that you'll be reviewing later this evening. So the enhancements that we have before you, they were guided by your commitment to our organizational culture as part of your strategic priorities. And employee well-being is at the forefront of that because we know that providing the highest level of care for our community starts with caring for our staff. We want to make sure that we at Burnsville are creating the type of organization that cares for our employees so they can thrive here and be their best, and that starts with our total rewards package. So with that, I'm just going to jump right into our total reward enhancements. Starting with health, dental, life insurance. Health insurance, we are looking to return our HRA VIVA open plan to be covered at 100% for singles. Dental insurance, this is something I'm excited about, being able to add employer-paid single coverage for dental for all of our employees. This is something that will put us at market. Before, when you were talking to me about our strategic plan earlier this year, this was an area that I pointed to that we weren't at market. So excited to bring us to market with providing single dental coverage. Life insurance, increasing it to all staff for one-time salary. Hospital coverage, this is an employee-paid option that just provides additional coverage for employees based on various hospital stays. And increasing our employer contribution to our HSA, HRA, and VIBA plans. The IRS increased the embedded deductible this year for health insurance, and so we wanted to make sure that we did an offset in increasing the HRA, HSA, VIBA to take care of that and provide that offset for our employees. Time away, paid parental leave. This is very near and dear to me as a new mother and first-time parent, offering up to 12 weeks of paid leave for the birth or adoption of a child. This is extremely important, and this is going to put us on the leading edge within our current market cities that we compare against. We will be the first ones to provide 12 weeks. There are some that provide paid coverage, but not at 12 weeks. And I find 12 weeks to be extremely important because it provides that time for our employees to not have to worry about a paycheck and be able to spend their time with their son or daughter and just bond and take care for them and cherish that time. Vacation accrual, being able to provide our employees current and our new hires coming in with recognition for years of experience that they are bringing into the organization or that they had brought in when they came here to Burnsville, and being able to adjust that on our vacation accrual schedule so they receive more vacation and recognition for years of service. Leave donation, this just provides our employees to help take care of themselves. The ability to provide sick leave to another employee who may need it at a time of serious illness or injury. Bereavement leave, providing up to 4 weeks of paid leave to grieve the loss of a loved one, and also consider, family and financial matters, really giving them the time and space to do so, and again, not having to worry about a paycheck. And caregiver leave, same thing, up to 4 weeks of paid leave, and this is just to care for a family member during critical illness, injury, end of life, again, letting them take care of themselves and their family, and when they come back to work, having them to ready and able to do so. And with that, those are our total reward enhancements for the 2023 year. Again, I'm extremely excited to share these with you, and I'm just looking for you to affirm your support as we prepare for 2023 for open enrollment and our continued recruitment and engagement efforts. Okay, and with that, I stand for questions.
Councilmember Workman.
Thank you, Carissa. It would be my honor to make a motion for this. When we met to discuss this preliminarily, I was very excited to see this as well. And one of the things we discussed is that when we're taking care of our people, we're getting the best back in the work that they do here And so the only shock was that we didn't have a lot of these things already implemented.
Yeah.
And 12 weeks is certainly better than 6. My wife's pregnant. We'll be welcoming our 4th here in November. And 12 weeks goes by fast. And so I can only
Sure does.
imagine what 6 is. And that's, those are the cards we have through her employer. So I'm very, very proud to see that we're the first city to be implementing this as a leader in the South Metro. So that is my motion.
Okay.
I will second that motion.
There's a motion and a second. And I want to thank you also, Mrs. Bartholomew, for the work that you have done to improve what we do in support of our staff, because we all know that when we take care of our staff, they do excellent work in service to our community, and that's what we're called to do. We're called to make sure that the people who are taking care of our residents and our businesses are being taken care of also. We provide the resources to help them be the best that they can be. And I know that you know what it's like to be a first-time parent and to having that time. And I know that Councilmember Workman also speaks to that item as well. And each of the time that his wife takes off to have their children, and now a 4th one is coming. And so, but also the bereavement piece is so important when you're going through grief, and so much is going on. So thank you for the work that you have done. Councilmember Keeley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. What is the total cost to the budget in 2023 for adding all of these benefits?
All of these benefits are a little over 200,000, which I think is overall pretty good when you start looking at a breakdown. The health insurance increase, about 11,000. Some of them are no cost, such as hospital coverage, the vacation, equivalency accruals, leave donation, bereavement leave. We've done some averaging based on previous use, 4,000, caregiver, 4,000. But that's kind of some of the breakdowns and overall big picture.
What's the largest, I guess, largest line item cost in the group?
The largest line item would be the dental insurance, which is 150,000. That's a employer-paid single coverage for dental.
Sure. Thank you. I think it's important to note that dental insurance is like just prepaying what you're going to spend. It's not really, I wouldn't qualify it. It's calling it as insurance because most dental plans are nothing like your health plan. But I think it's important to point out that there's a lot of these benefits that really have a negligible or no cost on our levy. And it's also, to me, it's more about the why. These are great things, but why are we doing this? In some cases, we thought they were already there. But I think people have to remember that we compete for employees just like the private sector does. And we are suffering the same challenges to find employees that the private sector is suffering right now. And so we're doing the same thing that most private companies are doing, and that is bolstering not only their salary offering, but their benefits. Because in survey after survey, salary is usually ranked 3rd or 4th behind, benefits, who you work with, fit with the company, culture of the company. Those are really the long-term bigger values than just the paycheck. Although obviously everything seems to revolve around the paycheck, but once you've sort of gotten in the range of where you want to be, well, then the company that gets your application is the one that has all those other things, right? And so we need to compete better. And I think this does make Burnsville very attractive. We've got a reputation of being an enviable city to come work for. And I think our current leadership team is returning us to that post in many different ways. And this is consistent with a lot of other things that are going right in the city of Burnsville right now. So thank you. I would support the item when the vote comes around.
Okay. If there are no other comments or remarks, thank you so much for bringing this forward because it helps our people to understand what we're doing. So with that, there is a motion and there is a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay, and the motion carries. Thank you so much, Mrs. Bartholomew.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, I usually don't make it a habit of making a comment at a council meeting, but I do want to thank you for your support and affirmation of these changes. When we talk about one of our 6 strategic priorities being our organizational culture, this affirmation this evening really does put us on the leading edge as an employer and helps us to further bring about the vision that we've worked together with the community to create here in Burnsville. So thank you on behalf of staff for the support.
Well, thank you for all that you're doing, because this is where we're going, and you're doing all of the right things to get us to that vision of being a vibrant city that's boldly leading.
Absolutely. Thank
So,
you, Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, the next item on our agenda is, okay, I hate this, but it'll get done.
That was my fault, and I threw you off.
No, I just need to. So the next item is a resolution establishing the proposed budget, the 2023 proposed tax levy, and authorizing the cancellation of the certain deferred tax levies. And presenting this evening is Mr. Dan Tintner. And good evening. You have, since March, have taken us through this journey.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. By way of continuing the introduction, I am Dan Tinter. It's worth mentioning that I am a senior financial specialist with Ellers and now officially your outgoing interim chief financial officer.
You mean we didn't convince you?
I don't know, the last presentation was quite compelling, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, members of the council, this evening I'll touch very briefly on the budget calendar, a little about the proposed 2023 budget in summary form, some discussion about the proposed property tax levy for next year, and then we'll close with some recommendations and some formal actions to be taken by the City Council this evening with respect to the property tax levy. As Madam Mayor mentioned earlier, we have been at it for quite some time with respect to the budget process. By counting, this is technically the 7th budget meeting of 2022 for the proposed 2023 budget. We technically began the budget discussion process all the way back in January 24th at the all-day work session when the council provided some of your initial thoughts and feedback regarding the next fiscal year. Moving directly into the budget itself, I always like to take a little time to remind the council about some of the things that aren't included at this point. The budget is, of course, an iterative process, and it evolves and changes over time based on any number of decisions or strategic priorities adopted by the council. So as you can see here right now, the expiring labor agreements have not yet been included in the proposed 2023 budget. We are scheduled to discuss the facilities study and the facilities fund with the City Council at the meeting on the 11th. The fleet study is ongoing. We have included the organizational analysis, and as it feels good to kind of scratch things off the list, I did add a check mark. So that is included in the proposed 2023 budget, and we have made some additions to the long-term financial plan to add the additional FTEs that were identified in the study completed by CLA. And then there is also an ongoing park system evaluation and inventory, which could impact the Parks Capital Project Fund, which is property tax levy supported. So in big round numbers, at this point in time for proposed budget 2023, the city anticipates to have about $120 million in revenues and funding sources. It's worth noting that about 39% of all budget revenues are derived from property taxes, and they are dedicated to a number of funds, most notably the general fund, and then also various debt service funds and a number of capital project funds like parks, as previously mentioned. And additionally, another 28% comes from charges for service, the largest portion of those charges for services being the utility fees that are charged by the city for water, sewer, storm, what have you. The proposed budget also includes $3 million of use of American Rescue Plan monies to fund eligible public services and to help defray pressures on the property tax levy. And in total, the funding for the city from all sources will increase by about $8.4 million, or just a rate around 7.5% to bring us under that $120 million figure I mentioned earlier. Those funding sources will be used to support an expenditure budget of right around $123.5 million. About 38% of all budget expenditures will support employee services. You can think of these as wages and benefits and a number of the items that the council approved as a part of your previous action. followed by 23% for current expenditures. This is essentially your operating budget. That does not include things like capital improvements and outlays, and then 22% for capital improvements supported by the various capital project funds. In total, expenditures will increase about $9.8 million, or about 8.7%. And as mentioned earlier, the expenditures are outpacing the revenues and funding sources by just a bit, so there is a use of fund balance across the entire budget of about $3.657 million, and the largest single component of that is the $3 million that's being used from the grant fund. That's where the city had assigned the ARPA monies, so those will then be used, moved over to the general fund to help out with the property tax pressure mentioned in the previous slide. The one thing to keep in mind is, as I mentioned, the city is in the middle of the organizational analysis, and the council has heard report on this in a meeting earlier this year, and through our budget process, we have added an additional 19 FTEs across all of the funds. It's worth noting that most FTEs are supported by the general fund, and then there are allocations to the water and sewer fund and also the stormwater fund, depending on the actual responsibilities of the individual FTE. So for example, in public works, a greater portion of those FTEs are assigned to your utility funds and aren't as much property tax supported. It's worth noting that the original organizational analysis called for 17 FTEs to be approved as a part of the proposed 2023 budget, but through our analysis, ultimately the recommendation provided by the city manager and staff was for 19. It's worth noting that in total, the proposed 23 budget includes about $2,598,000 for those additional 19 FTEs, and as I mentioned, they're spread across those various funds. This evening, we'll also talk about the proposed property tax levy. By way of reminder and perhaps benefit for the viewing public, the council did ultimately review 3 alternatives for the property tax levy, what we called the organizational analysis implementation. This essentially was focusing on implementing the organizational analysis, but then also providing for larger increases in the property tax levy in the out years. Alternative number 2, what we called the levy increase reduction, that essentially calls for a larger property tax levy increase in the first year and then lower increases in the out year, again with the idea of supporting the organizational analysis. And then alternative number 3 was what we termed CIP enhancement, that it's actually combined the strategies of both alternative 1 and alternative number 2, and that essentially required double-digit property tax increases over a number of years. At the meetings on August 23rd and September 13th, the majority of the City Council guided staff to prepare alternative number 2 for certification. And new this year, the resolution before the council this evening also includes a non-binding commitment to the forecasted property tax levy adjustments. So as you can see below, I've included a chart that kind of reminds the council about where it is the property tax levy over the 5-year planning period has been over the handful of meetings, and alternative number 2 listed in the blue box, 14.53% for next year, followed by 7.6, 7.1, 7.4, and 7.7. It's worth noting that these projection forecasts do not include the approval of the expired labor agreements. As I mentioned, it does not include any guidance as of yet from the City Council related to Phase 3 facility improvements, the recommendations of the fleet study, or the evaluation of the park system. So something to keep in mind as we look at our long-term forecasts. So here's a breakdown of the property tax levy for fiscal year 2023. As you can see, the 14.53% is primarily assigned to the general fund, an additional $6.5 million, and then overall the 14.53% below. It's worth noting, and the council did have extended discussion at the previous budget work session, the EDA fund will also be increasing by about $702,500, or about 236%. Ultimately, staff incorporated alternative number 2 into the proposed 2023 budget. And just by way of reminder, alternative number 2 provides a down payment on the organizational analysis, so there will be additional monies to bring on the recommended FTEs in future fiscal years. It does provide enhanced flexibility for the council, so as I mentioned, there are a number of items that have yet to be incorporated into the financial plan, and so the additional property tax levy authority will provide flexibility in those future years. As always, it maintains appropriate fund balances. The council does have an established fund balance policy, in particular for the general fund, and we're always keen to observe those and make sure we remain compliant. It strengthens EDA funding, as I mentioned in a previous slide. And the one thing that's important to remember with regard to the property tax levy this year is that it actually goes up by 14.5%, but the property tax rate does not increase. So it does provide an increase without an increase in that tax rate, and it stabilizes the property tax levy in those out years, so more predictable, stable growth. Ultimately, that will cost a residential median valued homestead about $18 per month for next year. By way of reminder, there's something of an EDA two-step that has to happen this evening. First, the City Council will be asked to consider the property tax levy certification, and then you will recess briefly to convene as the EDA, where you'll then be asked to consider the certification of the EDA tax levy, and then you'll reconvene as a council, assuming you approve the EDA levy, and then state law does require the council to then consent to the EDA levy. And at this point, staff does recommend the council and the EDA board adopt the resolutions, which are as presented and are included in your packet this evening. As always, I would be happy to answer any questions the council may have.
Are there any questions that were left over from last week, or
I have one
comments?
question, Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Can you go back to our labor agreements for a minute? Is there no money anticipated in this budget for the settlement of the labor agreement?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, there is money included for the settlement of the labor agreements. We have assumed a 3% year-over-year increase in wages and a 10% increase in health insurance premiums and a number of other items. It's worth noting that if those labor agreements were settled in excess of those assumptions, then there may have to be modifications made to the budget at some point in time in the future.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, in addition to that, I would just remind you that due to some staffing challenges, particularly in our HR group over the course of the past several months, we have not entered into formal negotiations with any of our 5 labor groups. Those are planned for the near future. Obviously, I will keep you updated on the progress there, but in fairness to the process, there are some assumptions made in the budget to try to cover for it, as Dan has mentioned.
Okay, very good. Councilmember Keeley?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Question, Mr. Tinter. Is the EDA proposed levy also the same number that was included in the 8.9% levy discussion? Is the EDA component the same in either the 8.9 or the 14.5?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, the EDA levy amount remains consistent between the two alternatives. The primary change was in the general fund component.
Thank you.
Okay. With that, may I have a motion to adopt the resolution that is before us to establish the max tax for 2023 proposed tax levy and authorize the cancellation of certain deferred tax levies?
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say nay.
Nay.
And clerk has the division of the House. Thank you. Okay, and now I will recess the Burnsville City Council meeting so the Economic Development Authority meeting can take place. President Gustafson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I call the Economic Development Authority meeting to order. Please note that all commissioners are present. Are there any additions to the final agenda? Staff?
Nothing.
Commissioners? Seeing nothing, we'll move on. Item 2, we go to the consent agenda. May I have a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner Couts,
Second.
second by Commissioner Workman. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? And we move on to the regular agenda. It's a resolution approving a proposed tax levy by the Burnsville Economic Development Authority, EDA, for taxes payable 2023. Jenny Rohde. Oh, Jenny's not presenting tonight. Dan, you're presenting? I have Jenny on my little thing here, so. So Dan Tinter will be doing it one more time.
Mr. President, members of the board, if it be so in order, the presentation already spoke to the EDA levy, so I would request that the board act on the resolution as presented.
Okay, thank you. Do the commissioners have any questions or comments?
Move to approve.
Moved by Commissioner Couts,
Second.
second by Commissioner Workman. You have a comment?
Discussion.
Discussion?
I just want to point out this is a $702,500 increase in the EDA levy. Last year or the year before, I was advocating for a $100,000 increase and to grow it over a period of time, and I did not receive support by the council at the time, but now we find ourselves more than willing to throw $700,000 in 1 year as an increase in the EDA. I don't agree with this sort of large jump in any one year. I think we could have grown it over a period of years to ultimately get to our goal. I'm debating whether I want to vote for this this year. I absolutely positively support getting EDA funds in place to be able to position the city to be able to be at least have the opportunity when properties come available, or we can participate with the private sector in a partnership to remedy some blighted property. But I think, quite frankly, in plain terms, jacking it up by $702,000 in 1 year is irresponsible.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'd like to add to that I believe on the 700,000, a little over 400,000 is just so that we can actually pay for what's programmed in the EDA already, because we were using reserves last year to pay for some of the funding in the EDA. And the other 300,000 is to start an investment fund so we can actually do some economic development in the city. And at 300,000 a year, it'll take us 10 years to buy that little strip mall that we'd like to buy, but we're going in the right direction. But please go ahead, Commissioner Schultz.
I don't think we can say that we want to buy a strip mall, because that is not anything that has been taken up by council or voted on.
It was an example.
So, like, I'm just so people don't freak
I get it.
out.
No, don't freak out. But there's a neighborhood that probably like us to do it.
We
I can tell
have
you
no
that.
plans of buying a strip mall, just for clarification.
We don't have the money.
We don't, yeah, we wouldn't have the money anyways.
Question, Mr. President.
Sure.
Mr. Tinter, of the 702,500, that is the increase over what we were already levying and have been levying. To President Gustafson's point, do we have to raise it 300,000 just to cover an expense that is apparently not being covered by the levy that currently exists within the EDA?
President Gustafson, members of the board, at this point in time, the recommendation is for the EDA levy to go from 297,500 to 1 million. The proposed budget for the EDA for next year is approximately $700,000. So at this point in time, if the levy were to remain the same, the EDA would have to rely on fund balance to fund its current planned expenditures for the following fiscal year.
And can you clarify what was the increase in the levy in the EDA fund expenditure that grew it to that amount compared to the prior year?
President Gustafson, members of the board, there are a handful of items, many of which were carryover items from previous years, having to do with some design guidelines for the city center village, if I'm getting the name correct. Additionally, some monies for freeway landfill consulting, and lastly, there were some money set aside for additional economic development analysis. This is so the EDA can have funds available to evaluate redevelopment proposals, and then also some money set aside for TIF district administration, among other items.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well,
So the design for the city center village, it is my understanding that even on our commission, we are no longer doing updates just on that, because that is not a primary focus anymore. Is that correct, city manager?
Mr. President, Board Member Schultz, I would say that that staff's approach to those updates has become more oriented towards our economic development strategic plan, understanding that there are many facets, Center Village being one of those priorities that we would like the EDA or the Economic Development Commission, excuse me, to focus on. So that's a long way of saying kind of.
Thank you.
Can I, point of clarification?
Commissioner Workman.
Last discussion we had about this, and $700,000 is allocated to existing programs that this council has already approved and said we would proceed with. $300,000 is in excess of that. Currently, home improvement loans, senior housing improvements, code cash are funded. Renovation grants, site assembly, and land general economic development, as it were, is not funded. But all of those items were agreed upon by this council. So But for this action on the EDA levy, would those go bankrupt next year, 2 years from now? What would be the forecast on those programs if we were not to act on them? I know I don't need a concise, to the month, but generally speaking.
Carry over.
President Gusson, members of the board, generally at this point in time, of the 5 grant programs that you described, 4 of them are funded by the Economic Development Authority Fund. 2 of them, as it relates to residential loans and the senior deferred loans, there's $200,000 set aside between the 2 programs. The loan amounts vary between the 2, but generally, if you were to take the lower amount, you would have enough basically to fund about 20 loans. And at that point in time, there is no additional ongoing revenue stream to support those programs. In fact, under the proposed 2022 budget and financial plan, the EDA fund actually dips to about $68,000 in 2024. And so you wouldn't even have money available as an EDA to fund it even at the current levels. And in fact, that $200,000 that's dedicated to both of those programs has been accumulated over 2 years. $100,000 appropriated in this year and $100,000 carried over from the previous year. So even in that instance, it did take the EDA 2 fiscal years to put together the resources it currently has available to offer what we described in a previous budget work session as a relatively small amount of loans, given the number of households that exist within the city. I would also add that the 2 other programs, the site assembly and the expansion programs, are currently unfunded, so there are no appropriations at this point in time to support those, and those were adopted by the EDA and the council in 2018, if I recall correctly. So there's been a number of years that they've been in place with no funding to support the ambitions of the programs.
And as I understand it, we don't have a roadmap as far as specific properties we're looking at acquiring or redeveloping. We're simply saying that if the opportunity presents itself, we'd like to have a seat at the table and at least try to move along some redevelopment in certain pockets of this community that are either long overdue or will be coming due soon.
That's my understanding.
Thank you.
You're looking at the mirror, me. Commissioner Keating.
My glasses are new, they're a little thicker than the previous pair. One final question. Is the 2024 EDA plan and forward accommodating, are the expenses requiring this 700 increase year over year? Because it's not a one-time increase. We're actually loading up by 700,000 this year, and that becomes part of the base year over year because this is an increase in that base. Do those forward year EDA budgets require the 700 year over year over year, even if we didn't vote for any additional increases, in those years?
President Gusson, members of the board, at this point in time, if memory serves, 2024 through 2027, the planned expenditures for the EDA do decrease from about 700 down to, I think, just above $400,000, reflecting that some of the activities that have been appropriated by the EDA are one-time activities at this point, such as creating design guidelines. One of the questions that came up at a previous budget work session was, with the additional funding sources, what additional programs or existing programs that are currently unfunded, as I previously described, could be funded. And we do know that right now the Community Development Department is planning to update the EDA strategic plan in 2023. And so we would imagine that some of the monies that aren't appropriated in 24 through 27 would eventually be appropriated by virtue of that second round of EDA strategic planning, and potentially with the EDA and city council approval, funding those currently adopted yet unfunded programs.
Well, I'll close out, Mr. President and Commissioners, that I have a hard time stomaching this big of an increase in 1 year, but I also wholeheartedly support all of those plans that we have talked about, and I know that they needed to be funded. We have traditionally funded them in an escalating manner over a period of time, so we don't put a little shock to our levy with a large increase in 1 year. But for this component of the levy, I'm okay with this 700 because it's all going to very good programs that will help the city. And it sounds like, based on your answer, after a couple of years, even if we didn't increase it in future years, the costs are going down and we'll be able to start building up some fund balance, even though it might not be as large as necessary if there are no other increases. But any future increases would end up providing a growing balance in that fund. Is that correct?
President Gustafson, members of the board, assuming that the EDA and the city council did not approve any additional spending as a result of the additional revenue. So at a previous budget work session, we did describe a situation where the EDA's fund balance would increase over time as a result of the variance that would exist in the budget. But if some of those programs were funded or new programs were created that required funding, it is possible that the amount of contribution to fund balance would decrease over time. And depending, much like the EDA has done in the past, if it were ever to exceed, then you would resulting use fund balance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all I have.
Commissioner Schultz.
So something has been hit on a couple times, and I do want to call that out. And that is, so the path that government takes when it increases a pool of money. So when we increase a pool of money, even if we don't have things to spend it on, we're going to find things to spend it on. And so I do want our residents to expect that we will find additional programs. We will create them, and then we will need to continue funding them. So I see this as it's an increase on up to 1 million this year, which is the total amount with the $700,000 increase. And I think when we pass this, that our residents should get used to it, because that is what this council will do in the future as well.
Any other discussions? We have a motion and a second, and I call the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
Division of the House, the clerk. And it passes. All right. The next thing is a motion to adjourn. I need a motion to adjourn.
That I will motion for.
Commissioner Schultz, says motion to adjourn. Commissioner Healy, a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And back to you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. I will now reconvene the Burnsville City Council meeting, and the next item on our agenda is to ratify the actions of the Economic Development Authority on the Economic Development Levy. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
There's a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say nay.
Nay.
And the motion passes, and the clerk has the division of the House. Thank you. We now move on to item 5E, and 5E is an ordinance adopting revisions to the City Code, Title 3, Chapter 24, pawnbrokers, secondhand goods, and precious metal dealers. Our city clerk, Mrs. Collins, is presenting. Ms. Collins, the floor is yours.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I would like to cite the fact that I'm employed by one of the larger secondhand dealer license holders in the city, and as I have in all previous discussions, I will recuse myself from this discussion on this item.
Okay. Councilmember Keeley is recused from the discussion and the vote on this item. Mrs. Collins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. This evening, we do have the ordinance that has been reviewed by our Code Review Task Force regarding resellers and secondhand good dealers. The changes were illustrated in your background, and I have like the list of changes, if you can, yes, you can see them up on our screen here. We have had a question about impact of some of the language in one of the sections, and I'll go down to where that is. We're looking at the definition of secondhand goods and whether or not the word including is exactly how we want to word that.
Page again.
If this is the main concern, we could propose something that would be more like as follows. If that would address the concern.
Councilmember Schultz?
Yes, I do appreciate that. I think that adds clarity if we just had the including,
Removed.
while those things, those would be examples, but would not be limited to. With changing that wording, I believe now we're more on the trail of limited to the A through G. Is that correct? I'll direct that to our city attorney.
Mayor and council, that's correct.
Great, thank you. I will ask for one more change, and it is in this same section. I wish to remove E, and I wish to remove G from that list. The reason I wish to have those removed is we do have second-hand stores. Sometimes it is by consignment, but other times it is by a purchase and then a resale of the second-hand item. And these are clothing stores, for instance. They can be like boutique-type stores. They can also be vintage stores. So having them, since we're taking a look at this, and I know that's not how we have enforced it in the past, but since we are cleaning up the language, that is my request so that we take them out of this category. So we do not have those types of stores being told that they need to do those requirements, such as, taking the photo ID of the person who is selling it, those types of things. So that is my request, and I am definitely open to discussion on that.
I have a question then. So is it only E and G where that you would like that? Because all the other secondhand goods, so electronic, audio or video, they have to go through all of that. They are secondhand goods that are resold. Sometimes they are bought and then again resold.
Personally, I would kill A through G, but I didn't want to be greedy about it. So if you are proposing, Madam Mayor, that we kill A through G, I am happy.
Well, I would say
Happy
that
to
we
second
need to
that.
do something with all of that, with secondhand goods, because we want to make sure, because firearms are a part of that. And I just want to make sure that we're doing justice to the secondhand good sellers. Yeah. Mrs. Collins.
Madam Mayor, City Council, I can tell you that this list has been reviewed by our police department and was updated to include the things that they see as trending stolen property. So
It's, okay.
this is what they see as the most common stolen property items that are
Okay.
trying to be pawned or sold to secondhand dealers. Specifically, the collectible cards item, Detective Gilligan informed us that he had one instance where it was $50,000 worth of collectible cards that he was trying to track down.
And because of the methodology that we have in place, they were able to,
We currently don't have that in our ordinance,
Okay.
and that's why it was added.
very good. Okay. So I understand why, yeah. Now, I don't know, because jewelry, people can also steal that and then, but if they're not under this ordinance, people can't reclaim their jewelry or precious metal.
Although, keep in mind, when the definition is given of precious gems, this also includes synthetic. So that's getting into the realm of costume jewelry. When you are looking at synthetic, that's a pretty wide definition. That is not just your, graded lab-created bloodless diamond. When you are defining it as whether as a separate item or in combination as a piece of jewelry or other craft item, this includes synthetic and laboratory-created gems. That's costume jewelry. That includes costume jewelry in that section. So that's a pretty wide swath.
Yeah, but boy, if your jewelry is stolen, I'd like somehow to reclaim it. And if we don't have a methodology that allows our police department to do some work to reclaim some of those items, because I think in the pawn shop domain, they're looking at jewelry, and when they're pawned, you can find out whether those are legitimately transacted.
I do understand the tension between those. I'm just saying that when we're talking about secondhand goods, we are including stores that are not pawn shops. These are not places where people are pawning these goods. We have quite a few gently used boutique type stores that with this language, they're going to come under this. And do we want to put them under that type of reporting?
Okay.
And I don't think so.
Councilmember Gustafson.
I'm trying to get where you're going with this. Oops, excuse me, microphone. Are you saying because it's for pawn shops, as you keep saying, are you saying you want it just to apply to pawn shops and no one else? Or,
I'm saying that this is calling out a group.
because that's what it was years
Wider.
ago. And
Yes. So, and there again, I'm looking for as wide as I can go. But since we are redoing this language and we have not enforced this on our boutique stores, our vintage stores, our secondhand clothing stores, since we're redoing this language, are we going to start enforcing it on them? Because if we have this language, that's what's fair. So I'm asking council, do you want that to happen? We have historically not done that. This is our opportunity to clean up our language to be in line with our practices.
Councilmember Workman.
I think if this list is not, if this list is incidental to the primary business, then it would not fall into a pawn shop. If I look at a store like Unique that primarily sells clothing and small household goods, but then also has a, an aisle dedicated to electronics, Unique shouldn't necessarily be put in the same category as Pawnworks, correct? So I think it would determine on what the primary sale of goods is, that would then determine.
Mrs. Collins.
Councilmember Workman, City Council. Unique currently falls under the exception to the license because they are donated goods.
Right, and there's some categories of it. So we have some exemptions already, which is it a donated good? Is it a consignment good? Or was it sold to them secondhand and then they sell it? So there's all these different exemptions, but many of our boutique type stores are our vintage type stores, in Burnsville and of course outside of Burnsville. They engage in several different types of transactions. So if they engage in one type which is not exempted, does that put them under this for all of it? Or just the item? Or do they know what item? So that's what I'm looking to clarify, and I'm just looking at bringing our language in line with our established practices that we've had for years.
So.
Maybe you know
Yeah.
way.
Mrs. Shipper, would you like to, because one of the things is that we have a list, and we must enforce, if we're going to have all of this, and we must enforce what's within any store who deals in buying or trading or selling what we have listed, so.
Mayor and council, and maybe I'll just step back a little bit to sort of frame this discussion, and hopefully it'll be helpful, and hopefully it's not redundant. But the whole point of this chapter is to identify certain types of goods that are more likely to be stolen, and looking at the the resale market for those, whether that is what is traditionally labeled a pawn shop, or whether it's called an antique store, or whatever, that secondhand transaction. And within this code, and you'll see this section isn't edited very much, the secondhand goods as delineated A through G have been the secondhand goods that we've been tracking for years, with the exception of the new edits to small home appliance and collectible cards. So of course, we want to think about whether or not those are the ones the council wants to track. And then if you are selling those, if you're a dealer in these secondhand goods, those are the transactions that you have to report through our system. So if you're selling some other secondhand good that's not on this delineated list, you don't have to report that transaction. Now, my understanding is that some of the bigger companies, the Pawn Americas, they are very meticulous and they report and track everything.
Right. Yeah.
But our code doesn't require that. It just requires that these types of goods must fall under the reportable transaction. So if you are otherwise a dealer of those secondhand goods and you don't fall under one of the exceptions, say for example, donated goods, you would potentially fall under the ambit of this code.
Okay.
And it sounds like there are potentially some stores maybe within Burnsville that, we were unaware of, or, they may fall under this code and may not be aware of themselves.
Yeah. Ms. Collins?
Madam Mayor, and just to add to Mr. Shepherd's comments, I think that some of the stores that would normally deal in this and don't want to get involved with being a reseller, then you do the consignment route, because they can still do the consignment route and not be a reseller.
Okay. Councilmember Schultz?
So when they do the consignment route, that adds to their business costs. So they're either going to have a raise with this, they're either going to have an increase in costs because of compliance with us, or they're going to have a raise in costs because they are doing consignment, which adds to business hours and internal business tracking and that type of thing. So when we say that they can do that, they absolutely can. You are correct on that. But what this will do is it will raise the cost of business for businesses operating in Burnsville right now who presently do not have those costs associated either because of compliance or because they've gone through a consignment basis on that. And again, by doing this and enforcing it, we would be changing how we have interacted with these businesses and the requirements that we have enforced. So I'm looking at how do we get to some status quo instead of adding costs and regulatory compliance. So that's what I'm looking for on the path here.
So what I understand is that we do have these secondhand goods already in our code. And we've just added 2 new categories. And so whatever is on this list, because police has gone through this, and they see this, it's some of the items that people are stolen, and then they're reselling them. So whatever is on the list, we must enforce, and are we going to enforce it? So any store that's going to be dealing with buying or trading or selling these listed goods. So I don't know whether there is an additional cost to the seller. Mr. Shepherd, is there an additional?
Mayor, by seller, do you mean the company or
The vendors
individual?
who are selling secondhand goods?
Well, I certainly this process takes resources, right?
Yeah.
They're the individuals bringing the product in, if it's a secondhand good that they have to track, they're tracking it and reporting it. So there's certainly resources that are required to fall under this licensure and to sell these secondhand goods in the community.
Okay. Members of the council, your thoughts?
I still have a question.
Yeah,
Trying to get through
Councilmember
all this.
Gustafson.
I hear what you're saying on these things. We have to find a middle ground here somewhere that the small dealer kind of person isn't getting hurt and all that. But I also don't want to put us into a position where Burnsville's a great place to bring your stolen goods.
Yeah.
It's like, because nobody's paying attention to in these small stores, and I can see that happening as well. And so there's got to be a middle ground. There's got to be a middle ground there somewhere. I know the consignment shops, which you've talked about. I go to them. My wife goes to them. I've used Touch a Home and all that. They keep good records. I bring something in. They write it down, what it is, who I am. They look at my ID when they've sold the product. I get a call. I go over there and I pick up a check. I mean, so there's a paper trail of this product that goes into that store. And,
Yeah.
you know, whether it gets reported to our police department as they do their rounds all the time, I'm not sure what's going on over there. And I know there's another one that my wife likes to go to that they give you kind of cash to spend in their store, credits
Store
for
credit.
store credits. And so she brings things in and then she gets $100 worth of store credits and she buys other things and it works, a barter program really is what it is, but. You know,
Right.
so, you know, where do you find that in between? My concern would be like jewelry stores. Could very easily for a small little jewelry store to take in lots of jewelry and not ever report any of it. And, you know, we do have the pawn shops who, I agree that the Ricksmans do a really good job on that, keeping
Yeah.
us informed
And
and all that stuff. And I hear no complaints about that
No.
company. So.
And then I wonder, you know, are we, you know, for the secondhand resellers, pawn shops are secondhand resellers.
They are.
And
Well,
They're
pretty
held
much
at a
everybody
higher
that sells
standard.
secondhand is a secondhand
Yeah.
reseller. It's like,
yeah, so, you know,
whether they're selling clothing or jewelry, that's a whole different deal
but I think they
altogether.
sell jewelry. They do sell a lot of jewelry and loose stones and
I get
everything.
it.
Councilmember Workman.
Thank you. I don't think this is going to get us any closer to a resolution here, but aren't these companies inventorying their goods
Yeah.
anyways? And so what is the ask here? They're taking the already established list
Yeah.
that anybody who is a retailer would have or would need to have.
Yeah.
And then we're just asking them to notify of specific items that are likely to be stolen.
Yeah.
No, we're asking a lot more of them. We are asking for them to submit to the licensing. We are asking them to pay for that. We're asking for them to have a background check, which they would have to pay for as well. In the process of reporting it, it isn't just how you write down at the consignment store who brought it in and 7 shirts and blah, blah, blah. It is a photo or video of each one. It has to be a certain size. There is a very regimented process to this. So it is a lot more than you think on this process. So it's not a small thing. It's not a small thing.
Is that our requirement?
Yeah, that's our requirement.
They have to
Now-
take a picture of everything that they've taken in.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, here it is.
Yes, they do, or a video.
Yeah.
So that is a requirement. What I would ask of council is, we have discussed this for a while. I don't know that we're gonna come to an on-the-fly resolution on something like this, especially something that would have impacts on our businesses. So my ask would be that we table this and have our city attorney and our staff look into it.
Yeah.
And maybe offer a suggestion to us, because they probably have a better idea of how to proceed forward than us
Yeah,
trying to do
because,
it on the fly.
yeah, on the fly, and I, you know, reading through all of this, I didn't. Yes, Ms. Collins.
Councilmember Schultz and members of the council, that was going to be my suggestion as well, is that staff could go back and research what potential impacts any changes would have and contact some of these stores to see if it would affect them, to make sure that if we're having some sort of significant impact that we're not understanding, that we're clear on that moving forward.
I would really appreciate that, because, one of my big questions is on that, adding in, this definition includes synthetic and laboratory-created gems, that language brings in costume jewelry.
Yeah, I would like, because right now,
50-cent costume jewelry.
Yeah, I would support that,
that's-
because right now, I'm looking at this, and I'd read through it, but I did not see it the way that you saw it, Councilmember Schultz. Councilmember Gustafson.
I'd just like to add on to that request that we also hear from what impact it may or may not have on our public safety.
Yeah, all of that.
Of course, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, all of it.
And the other part is that I would like to, if we're going down this route, so that there is fair and equitable, I'd like to hear from the pawn shop
Yes.
when we're looking at all of that. So if we're pulling that aside, I would like all of that information.
I appreciate that. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay.
Do we need to vote to table?
We
Yeah.
just need to, the vote would have to be to set aside the
Motion.
secondhand goods portion of the code, and all of that goes with it. So it's,
Could we table this
Yeah,
item as
Yeah.
an item? Because there's
Just this-
pieces that are connected in.
so
motion to
just-
table the ordinance in front of you, yep.
Yes.
But
will-
we can vote on adopting the balance of it.
Oh, I wouldn't do that.
No.
So we'll table this until we have all of the information. And then I would ask that the task force also be a part of understanding all of this, because they need to understand, because they send something to us with their understanding of what it is. So with that, then we'll just table this item and get more work done, and then have the task force also review it, and then bring it back.
Mayor, could we have a motion from the council?
Yes.
I will
yeah,
motion
yeah,
to table.
Yeah, there's a motion.
second that.
There's a motion and a second to table 5E, and that it come to us at a future date, not to be determined tonight, because you guys have a lot of work. Yes, City Manager Lindberg.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, I would just ask for clarity from the council as you table this item. If you would like staff to send this back to the Code Review Task Force on your behalf for further conversation, or if you're asking me to bring you a direct conversation on this item. And I would suggest and remind the council that both from a police perspective, from a city clerk's perspective, staff has reviewed this item, and the staff recommendation as it stands regarding secondhand goods is to add items F and G. And that process has been informed by a robust dialogue internally among staff, police, the clerk's office. So just some clarity from the council on specifically what you would like to see in the future on this item would be
If
appreciated.
I may, Mayor?
Yes.
So who then did not approve? Was not part of that approval process? I assume our city attorney? Then perhaps our city attorney looks at it.
No,
They wrote it.
the staff, our office, obviously the task force was part of this discussion, but doesn't mean we can't make tweaks if it's imperfect, so,
Absolutely.
yeah.
I just want to make sure that I'm understanding, Mayor and Council, what the council is looking for in terms of improving this to your satisfaction, and also making sure that we're communicating
Yeah.
well with your task force on what we're
Yeah.
doing here related to this
I
item.
do want the task force, because, I don't want them to feel that we're not respecting the work that they've done, and that they need to be included in understanding, moving forward, what this is about, and why we're delaying this action.
But
Ms. Collins?
Madam Mayor, I'm happy to update the task force on any proposed language changes that we have to maybe clarify, or because we had an unintended impact to certain businesses.
Okay, I think that would be great, because I just want them to know that we respect the work that they're doing, and that because of tonight, that we're directing staff to review this code, revising ordinance Title 3 and Chapter 24. And then the direction to staff is to go back and take a look and see what amendments can be done to bring back. And you understand the conversation that's going on tonight. Councilmember Gustafson.
I just want to remind everybody that what we're doing here tonight and what the task force is doing is to try and get it right in our ordinances. We're spending thousands of man hours doing this, and we've got another year and a half or 2 years left of this. These kind of discussions are going to happen in so many of our ordinances. I can think of a few already coming at us that we're going to have a lot of long discussions, so. And I don't want to throw it all back at staff all the time, because you guys work real hard with the task force also to kind of get it right. But let's, I just want to remind people that's what this is all about.
Okay, Councilmember Schultz?
Yeah, definitely echo my colleagues' statements. We absolutely do respect the heavy lift that the task force is doing. But this is normal. This is going to be a normal part of the process. We hope that it's, not too many of these, but that is part of the job of council, is to really look at these and say, okay, I'm looking at a possible impact here. Could we have clarification? And really, that's all we're doing, is taking a look at this, getting further clarification. And I do believe from the responses that our city attorney has given, he understands the questions that we have for language and enforcement. So we are trying to strike that balance, but we also don't want to do something wildly out of the norm that we haven't done before. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Okay, so wait a minute, there is a motion and a second. And City Manager Lindberg, are you and staff understanding the directive?
I think we're understanding it at this point, Madam Mayor.
You don't have to rush it.
Yeah,
This is not a rush.
I would say as a matter of timing, this has significant impact, particularly in our police department, and it will take us some time to get back to you.
Okay.
yeah, and that's why I said, time to not be determined. This is not.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I see that Mrs. Collins is also saying, But, I know that you're understaffed and doing this, and I know that police is understaffed and doing this. So, yes, we just want to make sure we get it right. And, but there's not a rush job on this. So with that, Councilmember Workman.
Just ask for a point of clarification. So while this is being examined, I would be curious to see what existing stores in Burnsville could be impacted by this, because I've been sitting here trying to think of stores. Granted, these aren't stores that I probably go to often, so I might have some blind spots there, but.
Yeah, you probably don't go to them.
Yeah,
I do.
I agree with you, because
What is
I
it called?
don't know, like
Jewelry?
Minnesota, on the frontage road that's
Minnesota?
close to Minnesota.
Antiques, Minnesota.
They already have they're one of our current license
They're a
holders.
license holder.
Yeah, and I knew that they're a license holder. And so have they been brought into this discussion?
We did contact them about the list of items, and they had nothing that they thought that should be added. It was the police department that requested the 2 items be added. But
And they're okay with the way the
they
license, this is?
We did contact them to let them know that we were updating the code, and we have not heard anything.
Okay,
Madam Mayor, members of the
Have
council, we
heard.
certainly will reach back out to those retailers that we're aware of and do our best to make that engagement as we work through the staff process with the city attorney's office to come back to you to provide you the clarity that
that'll
we
be
talked about
great,
tonight.
because understanding all of that helps us, because then we're not just assuming some things that may not be in the right direction, so.
Absolutely. We want to get it right alongside the council.
Absolutely. Very good. Okay, there's a motion and a second to postpone this particular item, and staff will bring it back at a future date, not to be determined until staff can do the work that they need to do. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oppose, say nay, and the motion carries. Members of the council, there are no other items to come before us this evening, and a motion to adjourn is in order.
So moved.
Second.
Third.
Can't even keep track.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Oppose, say nay, and the motion carries. Good night, and thank you for being with us.
Good.